And today goes in that same tradition as we are going to look into numbers, structure, patterns, geometry, math, and how the universe is constructed using the most simple yet energy-efficient means. We'll be discovering the geometric code of nature with Michael S Schneider, who is the author of A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, the mathematical archetypes of nature, art, and science, a voyage from 1 to 10. Michael Tessarion first alerted me to this book, and we've had a wonderful time exploring the content. Michael S. Schneider is an educator and writer who encourages a love of learning through an appreciation of mathematics, nature, art, and science. He holds workshops for teachers, artists, architects, and children on nature's numerical language. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in mathematics from the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn and a master's degree in math education from the University of Florida. He was a Fulbright Hays Scholar in India and taught in public schools for 11 years. Let me just say first that your book, A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, is a wonderful book filled with amazing discoveries and knowledge about nature's numerical language and how the universe is constructed. It's beautifully put together with diagrams, graphics, images, and explanations to how nature is constructed, and will give you the logic behind the numbers as well. I've always had somewhat difficult and most of the time excruciating experiences with math and math teachers and math classes, partly because all these mathematical rules that were thrown out at me and never properly explained. It was simply so much that didn't make sense to me, and I guess that is the case with inquisitive minds that want to understand why something is in a certain way. Just taking the words of the teacher or an authority's words for it is not good enough. But if I, and I think most other students as well, would have been given just a fraction of some of the wondrous qualities of our 1 to 10 number system that you detail in your book, Michael, I think we would have had a completely different approach to numbers and math overall. So it's wonderful that you've written a book and that you're teaching classes, Michael. I think it's what all children should be given a chance to learn at least.
Yes, thank you very much. I am teaching classes. I teach college classes at the California College of the Arts in San Francisco. And I have my own classroom where I teach whatever I'm interested in, and I seem to have found people who are also interested in it. Yes, it's a shame that children aren't shown the connection between simple numbers, simple shapes, nature, and even art. And it leads into philosophy. It's a very positive outlook. Instead of seeing the world as a crazy, fragmented, dangerous place, we can concentrate on the beautiful order and harmonies that actually underlie everything. And I think if children are shown the connection just simply of mathematics to nature, it would open everyone's eyes. It would change our outlook on not just mathematics, but the entire world, the cosmos,
yes,
and our place in it.
Did you come from an interest in math or geometry or art or maybe even architecture at the beginning before you wrote the book?
Well, as a teenager, as I was about 16, I got very interested in the mathematics of nature, and I decided to get degrees in mathematics so that I could understand this better. That was my real interest in that. Plus, mathematics seemed to me to be a kind of a language like poetry. There was something very beautiful in it. Now, I was not a very good mathematics student all through school. I didn't like it at all. It was seemed to me to be mostly memorization of rules, and it was just overwhelming. It didn't. It wasn't taught the way I would have liked it to have been taught.
Exactly. Same from my point of view, Michael. That's what I tried to mention.
Just about everybody's. Our teachers didn't know this, and their teachers didn't know this. Plus, the emphasis is on getting a job, getting into the high tech, getting all that information, rather than see the beauty, the absolute beauty behind it, and available to everyone. That's the wonderful thing about this. This is not the mathematics of nature and art and technology is not beyond anyone's vision if you understand how to read the simple shapes of things and the simple numbers. We talk about we have the phrase "the book of nature." Well, it's quite true actually. And if we realize that the language in which the book of nature is written is, as Galileo said, an alphabet of simple shapes like triangles, circles, squares, pentagons, and their combinations. You can actually read this book, and if you understand what the shape is about, because there are no accidents, in nature, in the sense that a five-petaled flower is not an accident. There's a reason for that fiveness, for its unfolding, for its harmony, its balance. And if we can read the simple shapes, understand what each shape is about. What is the circle about? What is the triangle about? And so forth. We can understand what nature is trying to do in any situation, and then we can work with it rather than against it.
That's right. And again, if we look at anything in nature, pretty much, we can slice an apple in half. We can look at how the branches grow on a tree and how the leaves are composite. These are things that at the initial stage might seem chaotic to us and random, but what you really detail in your book, obviously, is that all these things have a particular pattern to them, and there is a logic about how nature creates these things and put them together, right?
Oh, it's a beautiful and simple logic. It's nature's the best teacher. People have said that nature holds the patent, the original patent on every human invention. If we look to the way nature does things, we'll get the most efficient, energy-conserving, and also beautiful result, you see. It's all readable, and it's all down to simple shapes. It's not, we don't need complex equations and graphs and abstract, formulas and so forth. Just start to look at simple shapes. Nature's, circles, the squares, the triangles, pentagons, hexagons. I can name dozens of examples for every one of these. And when we start to see them, maybe even the cracks in the sidewalk.
Yes.
Walk around, we see cracks in the sidewalk. Do we notice that they're usually three-corner cracks, like the capital letter Y in English? The three meet at one point. Why does nature do three? Sometimes it's four. If it's a very slow crack, it'll crack in four. But three pulls together, very, very quickly. And just by noticing ordinary shapes all around us, it enriches our lives.
Absolutely, and there's so much to say, obviously, here in terms of art. Even if we look at art specifically, I guess one question that's always intrigued me is why people and human beings overall are attracted to certain shapes and patterns in art. We're obviously, during the Renaissance, many people weren't too savvy to some of these aspects here, but today many people are looking into the sacred geometry that are hidden in a lot of motifs on some of the early Renaissance paintings. These continue into the modern day, of course, as well, by artists who are in the know about these things. But why would you say that we are attracted to them? Are these symbols also, or patterns or numbers, are they also part of us in one way? Do they resonate with us, or why are we attracted to them, do you think?
Yes, I have to say so. Some people theorize that we are attracted to them because we've been around them in nature so much that we're used to them. But I think it goes even deeper than that. I think it is a part of us, a part of our fabric. We're a legitimate part of this universe just as much as anything else, and we have in us the same, shall we call them, archetypes in a Jungian sense, archetypal patterns. The idea of equality, we can feel it, and that's the circle. The circle is about equality in all directions as a circle spreads out from the center. That's one of its things. And the other shapes, they're archetypes within us, and we recognize them. They feel right. We recognize their correctness. And artists, since prehistory, have recognized that certain proportions, the proportions found in the circle, for example, pi, or in the triangle, the square root of 3, and the square root of 2, certain proportions have a more powerful effect on us. And this is what artists, architects, designers, craftspeople of all ages knew. In fact, in certain societies, it was law that you had to create only using certain proportions. Ancient Egypt, for example.
Right.
Proportions that would, even if you didn't understand them, that you'd be surrounded, ordinary people in their ordinary utensils and furniture and buildings and art and so forth, would be surrounded by certain proportions that would encourage harmonious feelings. They knew the laws of this, and they were very adamant about it. And that's why Egyptian civilization lasted 33 centuries. They knew certain things about maintaining harmony within the individual, within the family, within the town, within the nation. And China was also like this, that if you can maintain harmony at its earliest levels through proportions of objects and also harmonious music, for example, in China, India, Egypt, certain music was lawful and certain music and musical rhythms and patterns were unlawful because they would disrupt the peace of the soul and thus the family, thus the town, thus the nation. That's not done in democratic societies. Everything goes. But in those days, that's how they kept their society enduring by keeping as closely as possible to the proportions, the archetypal proportions found in nature, in their art, and even the design of society.
Yeah.
You see, but certain proportions have a more powerful effect on us than others, and this was the really open secret among artists and architects and craftspeople over many centuries.
Do you see more or less of this knowledge coming into the world today? Is there any of this harmonious proportions left at all if we look at some of the modern architecture out there?
It's not fashionable today. Artists generally, and in art schools I know, are taught, don't use mathematics in your art. It will kill the living effect of it. And I can understand that. Something that's overly designed is just not going to feel alive or really beautiful. And there's not much around today. The glass boxes throughout our cities and the odd shapes of buildings, they contribute to the feelings of dis-ease, unease, and fragmentation in society.
Yes.
They don't work to cohere the whole. Ancient societies thought in terms of a wholeness, and the parts generally were models in miniature of the whole. Just as if you hold a leaf up to the light, you'll see in the vein pattern a flattened version of the entire branching pattern of the entire tree. So the idea of designing society as a whole meant that the architecture was incorporated with it, in terms of the sun and the moon and light and shadow and so forth. Not much of it today. The world is in a psychological turmoil and confusion. People don't know where to look. People feel betrayed and confused and worried and so forth. But and the architecture contributes to that. There's not much of it today. People are kind of lost. But there's also sort of a riptide action occurring, that this knowledge is flowing back into the general knowledge. Ordinary people, maybe some architects here and there, and artists are using it, but it's still they're groping at this stage.
Yeah. Do you see that for our current civilization to even survive, it's necessary for us to adopt some of these rules and classical patterns again, both in city design and architecture, but also art and maybe things that we even have in our houses, in our homes as well?
Well, it would certainly help to create beautiful and harmonious objects around us. It's artists and scientists and engineers come across this little by little. It's the way things actually work and work best. So little by little, engineers and scientists and designers, discover it little by little. So maybe we're coming back to it. I don't know, but little by little, I think it's growing from the ground up. Actually, people are recognizing that they are not, the idiots that our teachers made us feel that we are in terms of mathematics. For example, that we are completely capable of understanding everything that nature teaches, everything, if we just understand the simple numbers. Now, I wrote the book from 1 to 10, although I did include information about 12 in there. And the idea is that if you understand only the numbers 1 through 12 and the shapes that come along with 1 through 12, you have a microcosm of everything that the universe expresses.
Yes.
You only have to know 1 through 12, and you know everything, really.
That's really interesting. And so do you feel that 11 and 12 is something that you have added on, so to speak, through the years of working with this as well, or are they equally important numbers to this as well?
Yes, they're equally important. I would have gone fully to 12 chapters. Each chapter is about those numbers. I went to 10 because I really didn't know enough about 11 at the time, and I didn't want to leave a big gap there. So I put information about number 12 in the chapter with number 6. But 1 to 12 is complete. See, if you understand everything from 1 to 10, you can understand everything that occurs on Earth, all of nature's designs on Earth, or as they used to say, below the ring of the moon. But if you go with 11, which is like a passageway between two great systems, between 10 and 12, and you go to 12, you can understand everything in the complete cosmos beyond Earth. You see,
that's
so 1 to 12 is it.
That's really interesting. I just want to mention that because 11 is considered to be that passing point in the Kabbalistic system as well. I think it's known as the dot, and it's like the entry point into the other side. And beyond that, obviously, again, we have 12. So that would make sense to me from that particular point of view, anyway.
Yes, I mean what I'm saying is if you understand the essence of the numbers, because the essence of the numbers is not cultural. It's not cultural at all. It's inherent in what the number is. The number is beyond culture. And so whatever system we look at, Kabbalah, philosophies from ancient Egypt, China, India, Native America, Europe, the Celts, anybody, if you understand these numbers, you can really understand what they're talking about, because the numbers are the same in every system. Maybe they just bring out different aspects of the number. But 11 is it's always a passageway between two great systems. It's always a doorway. It's always a boat ride with 11 passengers, or in Chinese feng shui system, there's what are called a magic square of Earth and a magic square of heaven, and the numbers on them between Earth and heaven and the corresponding parts always add up to 11. It's it's a passageway. It's like 2. If you add 1 and 1, you get what's called the digital root of the number, and 1 and 1 is like 2, and 2 is also a passageway number. 1 and 2 are considered the parents of numbers, not really numbers themselves, and they give birth to the digits 3 through 9. In other words, Trinity to the Trinity of Trinities. And with that and 0, you can create everything. 3 and 4 and 6 and 8 and 12 are considered structural numbers, the numbers that nature builds with. 5 and 10 are considered the numbers of life. The flower of every edible fruit has 5 petals. 5 shows up when you slice an apple, or 5 fingers. It's associated with life, 5 and 10. And then 7, 9, and 11 are considered numbers of mystery. They cannot be constructed. 7, 9, and 11-sided figures, regular polygons, cannot be constructed with a compass and straight edge. They're mysteries. They're here, but they're not here. Like 7, the rainbow. It's here. 7 colors of the rainbow are there, but nobody can grab it. 7 is always about things that you can't grab, can't hold on to. The 7 notes of the musical scale, as the great writer and philosopher, antiquarian John Michel said, no one has ever had to sweep up after listening to music. 7 is there but not there. Same with 9 and 11. So these numbers 1 through 12 each have their sort of role or properties, and they can be grouped in those 4 ways.
What do you think is behind this construction of the universe? It's a self-replication that is going on that mimics itself in these shapes and in these numbers. Do you think that it's simply a set of rules that are set in motion at one point, or is it literally a creator behind this? Is the numbers the creators maybe themselves? What do you think, Michael?
Wow, big questions. When you use the word creator, we get into a whole other realm of this. I would say this. I would certainly say that the structure of numbers is replicated in the structure of creation. I would say that the motivation for the existence of the universe is wisdom. Wisdom is behind everything. Everywhere is an expression of wisdom. I think that's fundamental to the universe. No one created numbers. We create the numeral systems that symbolize numbers. The 0, 1, 2, the squiggles, and the Roman numerals, and the Babylonian numerals. We invent those, but nobody invented numbers. They came simultaneously with the universe, and the universe expresses them. Whether there is a creator behind that, I don't want to go anthropomorphic and give human qualities to a creator, but I would say the essence of creation is wisdom. Mm. And if the Big Bang actually occurred, I have my doubts that there was nothing, as someone said, except maybe a suspicious package, which exploded. Nothing exploded and became something. Right. How did it go from 0 to 1?
Yeah.
I would say the only thing I could recognize there is a motivation of wisdom. Whether it's divine wisdom, I would suspect so myself. I think the universe is really solid intelligence. Everything we see is some kind of intelligence and wisdom made solid. Whether that's a conscious being, even if the word being is correct, consciousness. The universe is the power to be conscious made manifest. That's the best I could go. Mm. But it seems to me to be a benign wisdom, and numbers, the structure of numbers, are seen in the structure of creation. And why that happened, I don't know. But this is certainly the universe we find ourselves in, one that is a celebration of number and shape, pattern, beauty and wisdom, all expressed through materially through the forms we see. The words matter and pattern really go together. They come from the Latin roots. Matter comes from mater, mother, and pattern comes from patron, pater,
yes,
father. So matter and pattern are like the mother and father, you might say, of everything. And that's all we see, matter and patterns. And matter and energy, of course, being interchangeable.
and this is...
So yes, the big question is a big answer.
That's right. And again, this is what we find around us, and this is what we have to work with, if we look at it that way. We haven't been, as far as I know, we haven't been given any instructions, as it were, from a or the creator, but there is certain rules here and certain patterns, just as you say, and they're very basic and simple. I think in most cases humanity are setting out to looking for these vast, big questions, and we might look too far, so to speak. We look into space or shoot rockets into space to try to figure out what it's all about. But we have clues right here on the planet if we just pay attention and look at the simplest little details, and it's right there.
Yes, what is simple is most all-pervading through the universe. What's simple patterns, the simple forms. For example, what are called the 5 platonic solids, or mathematicians call the regular polyhedra. These shapes, we see them as game dice, 4-sided dice, 6-sided, the usual dice, 8-sided, 12-sided, 20-sided. These 5 shapes, called the platonic solids, are the only ways that three-dimensional space can be enclosed using the same triangle or square or pentagon or any regular shape. There are only 5 ways that this can happen, that three-dimensional shape can be structured in its basics. And so these 5 shapes, everywhere you look, any type of three-dimensional structure that occurs in nature around a central point. Let me be specific with that. So, for example, every crystal in the universe and every crystalline structure and that means at the heart of every atom is a combination of these shapes, these 5 shapes, at the heart of every atom. So that pervades everywhere.
Yes.
So we don't have to look to the big, beautiful structures. Look at the little ones, the little basic shapes, triangles, squares, pentagons, boom, every atom there is, just from that.
Huh.
So looking simply is the way I approach things. I like it. I can see the fundamental armature of everything. You know, the circles, the triangles, the spirals. Spiral is the most widespread shape, you know, in the universe.
Yes.
Tiny whirlpools, you know, in a cup of tea, to the giant galaxies and whirlpools of water and hurricanes and tornadoes, and our spiral fist and embryos and curling hair, ears, and you name it. I mean, tendrils of plants. You see the same shape. It's like the forms of nature are like and the shapes are like a small group of actors that travel around, and they change into many costumes in their play. But it's the same actors in nature, but they have different sizes, different materials, different locations, but it's the same shapes, the same actors, the same spirals, circles, triangles, squares, yes, under everything. It's really quite simple, actually.
It is, and that's what's so wonderful about it. And it's like rediscovering the most simple things there is. As I went through your book, just beginning with the monad, going on to the dyad, and just really it's realizing how you go about logically explaining how it works. It makes incredible sense, but also opens one's eyes in a totally different way. And speaking about some of these different from 1 to 10 that you go through, do you have personally any like a favorite shape or a number that you continuously go back to?
Well, out of the 12, you know, it's like having children. Really, you know, you don't want to have favorites, but certain ones actually stand out. I mean, I love them all. They're all equally wonderful. The one that really attracts me, though, is the 5, the pentagon, the pentagram, the 5-petaled, 5-sided shape. Mm. If you look at the chapters, I didn't their sizes. I didn't do this on purpose, but you know, 1 is small, 2 gets bigger, 3, 4, 5 is the largest, and then they go down 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, smaller again. 5 was the largest because it relates to, or it's formed by what's called the golden ratio, you know, which is really just the relationship of the bones of our fingers as they get smaller to larger, or larger to smaller, or it's the relationship of where our wrist divides the distance from our elbow to our fingertip, or where our navel divides our body, or where our nose divides our face. It's all the same ratio. It's found in seashells and flowers and wherever you see spirals. So that's what made the chapter so large. It contains the golden ratio and the spiral. And it's quite interesting to me. It may be a favorite. 12 is also a favorite. 3, they all have their beauties.
Yes.
You know, but I really am attracted to this 5 and the golden ratio. It's so quite interesting. It's at the essence of the design of pine cones. You know, anything you see spiraling in nature, the way leaves come off of plants, or cauliflower patterns. There's all these so-called Fibonacci numbers.
Yes.
And 5 and the golden ratio and the spiral, pentagram shape. It's one that seems to attract me quite the most.
It is really spectacular. And have you compared this particular? I mean, it's not really a theory or thesis as such. It's just a presentation of what is there and what it is. But if we look at, there's another aspect in terms of how these patterns and shapes and numbers repeat themselves, which is termed the holographic universe, for instance. I'm sure you heard of it, Michael Talbot, his book.
Yeah.
And obviously there is a similarity there in the approach, that you in the smallest little detail you can find how the pattern of the largest thing is, so to speak, and it's you can look up or you can look down and you will find the same similar pattern everywhere. So there is a similarity to me there. But what do you think about that, Michael?
Yes, it's absolutely true. That's one of the basic characteristics of the universe is the holographic model, or the sometimes called the fractal, or the idea that the idea is that the parts model each other and the whole, even though it may not be obvious. For example, we can find the proportions of the entire human body in the proportions of the bones of the hand and the forearm. We can find as I mentioned, the pattern of the branches of a tree in the pattern of the leaf. We find the entire universe. I mean, if we think of the moon goes around the earth, and the earth goes around the sun, and the sun goes around its sun, it's speculated, which goes around the galaxy, and then there are clusters of galaxies that swirl. The idea of the model, each section is like a model of the larger section, and each larger section is made of smaller sections. I think the best example of this is the cauliflower. You know that vegetable?
Yes.
You see them in different colors these days. But if you look at the whole cauliflower, it's like a big bump, and it's made of smaller bumps. And if you look at each smaller bump, they're made of smaller bumps, and each smaller bump is made of smaller bumps. And each of these bumps is made of spirals of these smaller bumps, and it's spirals within spirals within spirals in the cauliflower. So my best guess, the best model I have for the shape of the entire universe is a cauliflower.
And it's there's another one. What is it called again? Romanesco broccoli or something like that.
Yes,
I mean, that's fantastic.
That is my favorite of the cauliflower. So the Romanesco, the angles are very sharp. You know, it's a green cauliflower. I think it came out of Japan. It's the sharp. You can really see the sharpness of the spirals within spirals within spirals on them. Oh, I love those.
It's fractal vegetables, as it were.
Yeah, all the plants are fractals.
Yeah, yeah.
No, the leaf is a model of the twig, which is a model of the branch, which is a model of the bough, which is a model of the whole tree. Each section. This is the basis of the Japanese art of bonsai. You know, the miniature plants where they take a branch and they plant it as if it's an entire little tree. You know, that bonsai plants. And so that's the idea behind that, the fractal holographic model where the parts model each other in the whole. And that's, again, the essence of the golden ratio.
Yes.
That's the idea of what it's about. And the five-pointed star. Every space in the five-pointed star can create another five-pointed star. Even the triangular spaces can create five-pointed stars, and smaller ones and smaller ones. And that's why we see this fiveness so often in nature. It means that nature is building itself out of smaller and smaller models of itself. And the reason is that it can all balance. You know, a tree or a bush with different five-petaled flowers on it will have those flowers at different sizes, different stages of growth, different locations, and yet the whole plant balances perfectly. Whole trees balance with their tens of thousands of branches and leaves, and they'll balance. Doesn't anybody wonder how that happens?
That's right.
It's because the parts model the whole. And when you do that, when you build that way, the whole will balance. And the parts will balance. It's a complete harmony. It's a wonderful lesson from nature.
Yeah, so that's how it can grow from the smallest little seed, basically, up to this giant, because it's spiraling upward and outward in a fractal Fibonacci sequence, right?
Fibonacci sequences, exactly. Wherever you see these Fibonacci numbers, the sequence starts 0 and 1, nothing and something. It's sort of like the Big Bang, so to speak. And the rule is that these two numbers add to make the next. So 0 plus 1 make 1. Then 1 plus 1 make 2, 1 plus 2 make 3, 2 plus 3, 5, 3 plus 5, 8, 13, 21, 34. These are the numbers that we find as the petals on a flower. I don't know if you have in your country the old thing of plucking petals, she loves me not, she loves me not.
Sure.
Well, you can actually make it come out the way you want if you know which flowers tend towards which Fibonacci numbers.
Right.
A little useful knowledge there. But the petals of flowers, the numbers of spirals, going around a pine cone in each direction will be consecutive Fibonacci numbers, or on a pineapple or asparagus or artichoke, wherever you see spirals crossing. Where spirals cross, something comes out, a leaf, a branch, a flower. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Do you think that human design still have a long way to go in terms of maybe how we build buildings that could, let's say we're living in a zone where it's earthquakes or something like that, that we could learn also how to build and replicate what nature already done in order to make it last longer or of that nature?
I think so. I think nature knows what to do, and we're best to study it. You know, one of my interests is plants, plant geometry, plant chemistry. I really think that the solution to worldwide energy problems must be in understanding how plants work, how chlorophyll converts sunlight into energy.
Yes,
and rearranges matter this way. I can only think that if we study the secrets of chlorophyll, of photosynthesis, we can go most directly to the most practical and cleanest solution. I think we may be a way off, but I wish that governments would invest, would focus on that. You know, focus like a sunlight on it, no pun intended. Because I think if we study nature, we'll get the most efficient ways to work. Nature's certainly most efficient, gets the most out of the least.
Yes.
You know, this is the idea of the circle. The circle contains, for the same distance around. You know, if we took a loop of string and made it a circle, a triangle, a square, the same loop would contain the most area as a circle, the least area as a triangle, and intermediate areas as other shapes. It's sort of counterintuitive. You'd think the same loop would make the same area. But the circle contains the most. So if you want to, if you like pizza and you like toppings, you want to get the most toppings. If you have a choice between a square pizza and a round pizza, and they have the same length of crust, the round pizza will have more toppings. You see?
Yeah.
So this is how we can use our intelligence in mundane ways for pizza, and in grand ways for energy solutions by studying nature. You know, energy moves in spirals whenever we leave it alone. So I would think spiral motion would be another way to study how energy can be created, used, and conserved most efficiently. Yes, I agree with you. I think the studying nature will provide a lot of solutions. And I think scientists are coming to that. Engineers are coming to that because that's what works.
Yes.
That's what's most efficient, and then little by little we walk towards that.
What can you say about ancient and current religions as well? They seem to have, obviously, in one form or another, saved or picked up on some of these things. We can see it in some Islamic art. There's a certain number system there. We obviously have the wonderful the windows of many of the cathedrals, Gothic cathedrals. There's other places as well. Obviously, in Egypt, in your book, you detail even the face mask of King Tut, if that's indeed what it is. But it's there nonetheless. We can find that pattern in there. And again, do you think that those things have been an accident, or do you think that people who constructed these things and painted these temples were aware of what they were doing at that point?
I think that certain people among them were aware. There was a core of teachers in each of these. What they did is they encoded their knowledge and their wisdom in their sacred architecture. If we understood it, we'd see great wisdom being taught there. Sacred architecture is generally a microcosm of the knowledge of the whole universe. You know, these ancient sites like Stonehenge and so forth, not only were they astronomical devices for understanding the movements of the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars, but they also encoded their wisdom in the proportions and the dimensions of these. You know, these Stonehenges and Woodhenges that are found all through Europe, they were actually schools And the larger ones were actually universities, where knowledge was taught, real knowledge about the way the universe works, the way nature works. And there were schools all over the place. They were schools. They're not recognized as such now. They encoded their knowledge in their architecture and in their art. And we can read it somewhat. You know, there's great work been done by John Michel and John Neal in terms of measurement. John Neal's book, All Done with Mirrors, and John Michel's work, Michell, the late, great John Michel, his work, The Dimensions of Paradise, and How the World is Made According to Sacred Geometry, a new book, shows how these ancient structures encoded their knowledge of measure and proportion and design in nature. And even alphabets, certain alphabets through nature, through history, the Greek, the Egyptian, the Hebrew, the Sanskrit, Syriac, certain languages even were built to model the sacred nature and patterns of the universe. You know, we've lost touch these days with the essence of religion. I mean, just look around and religion is disparaged, and you know, sacred books are looked at as mythologies and fairy tales, and you know, ancient ideas to be disregarded. If we read them on the surface, you might get that opinion, but if you read them a little deeper, and you have to have knowledge. See, most people, they don't really have the knowledge that these ancient people had in terms of astronomy and music and so forth. You can read in them great wisdom, the Bible, great wisdom, but it's lost, and people don't know how to read the symbolism anymore. If you look at them, you find all these interesting numbers that come about. You know, there'll be 7 this and 7 that, and 144,000 that, and 12 of this and 72 of that. When you see that, you know there's something deeper that they're saying on a different level. And I don't know if that'll get rediscovered, or if it will be tossed into the dustbin of history. But the great works, the great religious sacred books through history, and the architecture they built, the Islamic art, the cathedrals, the temples, and the sacred places, they encode this wisdom for their people from those times. And maybe someday we'll discover it and appreciate it again. I don't know, though.
It feels like we're also in the situation where we interpret things literally instead of, as you say, looking at reading between the lines and seeing what is there veiled and what is hidden in one way. But do you think that, again, why do you think that it has been, if we make that assumption that it has been hidden from regular people? Some priest classes in the ancient world have had it, or at least the architects who built their temples have had this knowledge. But it's like it's there, in some cases right in front of you in the church that you go to, or temple or whatever it might be. But there's not a literal or a direct communication from the priesthood to you about these things. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's lost, I think, even to the priesthood today. They may have some of it, but they don't really, I don't think, well, at least on the externals, there must be in each group core groups that still have this knowledge. I'm sure of it. But it's not, just as our teachers couldn't teach us about the connections to nature with mathematics, the priesthood today, everybody's gone very literal. It's one of the most surprising things to me. I would have thought we would have gotten more abstract, but things are taken so literally, and I think this is because our educational systems, I don't know about yours, but I think ours have gotten dumber.
Same here.
Same here? Yeah. I think the things that we concentrate are not important, really. I think it's what makes people into, the education system is more about making people into cogs in a machine. You know, it's about fitting in, rather than discovering and leading. You know,
And truly understanding
truly understanding. There's no call for it. Everybody's in a rush to get a job and make money and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that aspect of life. That's essential, absolutely essential. But there's more to it. And our leaders, government, in religion, and education, they don't really know it themselves. That's my impression anyway.
Yeah.
And based on the results. But it's there, and I think it's for individuals and small groups to rediscover.
What can you say in terms of corporate logotypes and things in the corporate world? There seems to be a preservation there, at least in many cases, right?
Yes, and that's interesting and ironic, is that one of the places that this knowledge is being preserved, shall we say, but for really nefarious purposes, for manipulation purposes, is the power of these proportions on us, the power of these shapes are used in terms of advertising and corporate logos and so forth for the purposes of manipulation. See, they know, either intuitively or intentionally, that these proportions, certain proportions and shapes, have a very powerful effect on us. So they incorporate them into the logos and advertising, and they have a kind of a mesmerizing effect, and they're making use of them. So it's ironic that's where some of this knowledge is being preserved. But then again, it's not unusual to preserve knowledge that way. I think in times past, when wiser ones among us realize that we go into these periods of darkness and ignorance, they say, well, let's preserve the knowledge. How can we do it? Well, people are going to gamble and dance and so forth. Let's build them into the folk dances. Let's build them into the design of a deck of cards with a 52, so forth. And so they built this knowledge into all sorts of, virtues and vices. So at least it would be preserved. But it's kind of, I see how the advertising does use this. It's very astute of you to notice that. But that's where they're using a lot of this knowledge.
Do you think that it's this is used simply to manipulate people actually into buying more, or getting a certain attraction to a company logo, for instance, or to get that familiarity between you and the brand, I guess, in one way? Or do you think that could there be something else behind that?
No, I think it's to me, it seems to be about attraction to make purchases. That's what the intent of the corporations are. I think I don't see them as really being. They're important. I'm not against corporations, but I do see how it seems to be about manipulation. It doesn't seem to be altruistic in terms of let's bring joy to the populace.
That's right.
It's about let's get them to notice us. Certain colors and certain proportions and certain shapes are very attractive. People, psychologists study, they put cameras in supermarkets and study people's eye movements, that.
Yeah.
And so they look to see where people are looking in the aisles, and they set up certain aisles as test cases to see if certain colors, proportions, heights, and so forth attract people. And they're there to make money for their stockholders, and good luck to everybody. May the best companies win, and that's why Darwinian evolutionary theory is so strong, because it really supports the corporate structuring. Survival of the fittest, etc.
Yes, it's all competitive in that way, and just as you say, I would agree with you. There's nothing particularly wrong with the corporate world as such, but the problem, or the crux that is happening right now, is that we don't have any of that spiritual essence left, it feels like, in our lives anymore, as people are walking maybe away from the church. And initially that might be seen as a good thing by many people also, but at the same time, what I'm getting at is that many people walk out on the little spirituality that even was in the church at that point as well, and they try to get that by going over to a brand instead, or in other words, they're attracted to certain things in the corporate world because on some superficial level they give you what you want in terms of these sacred numbers and shapes again. I don't know if that's true, but what do you think, Michael?
Yeah, we are attracted to these. I think people many people, it's hard to generalize, but many people are moving away from the organized religious institutions, and they're seeking spirituality through their searches. That people are searching. I think everything that anybody does at any time, regardless, is really a search for God in some form, and which really means a search for the deepest essence of ourself. And yes, people are attracted to these. People are certainly attracted to logos, to corporation. A lot of people want family. The urge to the tribal group is very, very strong. And to group thinking, which is really sad and dangerous.
Yes.
But there's a real urge to that because people are rejecting the past, but don't really know where to go in the future.
Yeah.
So that people are trying different things, but the lessons of peace and harmony and spirit are really all around us, all within us, but we don't recognize it generally. I mean, we can feel it, but where to go, people don't always know. So, if we hold to the truths that are capital T truths, the eternal truths, and look to those which are represented by numbers and shapes, which are really expressions of principles. 2, polarity, 3 is about balance and strength and so forth. If we look to the eternal principles, not as objects of worship or anything like that, but as for feelings of trust and security, that's where security lies in what's eternally true.
Yeah.
And while these shapes in nature are not worthy of being objects of worship, they remind us that there is goodness at the heart of things. And I think if we focus on that, we attract goodness to us, and good luck and prosperity and happiness. I think what we shape in ourselves is what we find happening around us.
Right, and we might be, as you say, have a sense of comfort in the fact that the universe isn't chaotic, it isn't random, it isn't designed to devour itself in that sense. It's a creative force, and it's there. And again, if we look at it from the Darwinian point of view that you brought up before, then it's easy for us to get that idea that everything is in competition with everything else, and it's everything is falling apart instead of actually building up to something as well.
Oh, it's always building, always transforming. It's always like I said, it's always a riptide. There's always something going in this direction. There's always something going in the opposite direction. When something is crumbling, there's also something somewhere that's building. Just the way that things work. And so, in times of transformation and transition, which I think we're clearly in terms of societies and people's understandings and people's longings and what's working in the world, what's not working in the world. We're in this transition, this riptide period, and so along with the confusion, it's also good to realize that there is goodness here, and that there are messages to us in everything that are telling us that, okay, it may look chaotic on some level, on that level, but at the foundation of it, it's striving for goodness.
With some of the other more dire things that we talked about here, with those things in mind, are you positive or negative in terms of where the human race is going overall? Human race? Yeah.
Well, on topics like this, I'm usually wrong because the unexpected always happens. But I would say short-term negative, long-term positive. But I could be wrong. I could certainly be wrong. It could certainly long-term positive is good. Short-term, I don't know. It just seems to me to be that the things that are not working anymore are crumbling, and that new institutions should arise or will arise naturally in their places.
Yes.
But what doesn't work, I don't know. I think there's all kinds of manipulations going on and so forth. It just somehow the worst in people seems to get brought out at certain times. But there are enough good people also. And so it's a confluence of events. There's a crumbling and a building going on. So historically, in transition times, it gets darkest before the dawn. So I expect something like that. But it could be, dawn in 4 minutes from now, as far as I know. It could be that humans will smarten up and do what's right in the world.
Yeah.
Let our conscience be our guide, and let nature and numbers and shapes and let beauty and truth be our guide. I know these sound like corny abstractions, but they're literal. These truths are all around us in the ordinary shapes and patterns that we see, and if we can understand those principles, I think we'll feel a lot better about where everything is at.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And again, I just urge all our listeners who aren't yet already familiar with it to discover this book by Michael S. Schneider, a beginner's guide to constructing the universe, the mathematical archetypes of nature, art, and science, a voyage from 1 to 10. It's wonderful, and I think it's a good step in that direction in terms of changing people's overall perception and relationship to reality and nature as well. Michael, why don't you tell us about your website and where people can go to pick up a copy of this book if they're interested?
Well, I don't sell the book itself. Online, it can be purchased much cheaper than I can even purchase it from my publisher. So I recommend people buy it. Well, first of all, I say support your local independent bookstore. And if you can't order through them, then buy it online or through another bookstore. But my website, constructingtheuniverse.com, Constructing the Universe, like the title of the book. If you go there, I put out some interesting things for people to see and do. And I also offer, I've created a set of 6 activity books or workbooks for people who want to learn how to use a compass and straight edge on their own, step by step at your own pace, very simple. And I show you how it relates to nature and to art. And it's really good for not just young people, but everybody, because nobody's had a really good education in this. And it's also especially good for artists and architects and craftspeople to see what these great proportions are and how to use them, how they have been used, and how to use them. So I have a set of 6 activity books, and I ship them internationally. So I'd be happy to hear from your listeners.
All right, that's wonderful. Constructingtheuniverse.com, that's the website. And in terms of classes and things like that, is there anything else you'd like to mention to our listeners of if they're interested in joining one of your classes? Can they do that through your website as well, or how does that work?
Well, right now I'm only teaching in Northern California in my own classroom, but I am doing my best to record these on film to be able to make DVDs for sale. So keep in touch with my website, and I hope by the end of the year to have a number of DVDs about the numbers and about art and nature and this kind of philosophy, and things that people can do, that you can actually do and see and start to notice. One of my workbooks has these plastic lenses, you might say, that you look through with geometry on them at images in the book. I have images of nature, art, technology, with all the shapes, and you put these little plastic pieces on them, and you see how all these beautiful works of art and nature, technology have been designed. Then you can take these pieces outdoors and look at nature through them, or you can take them to museums. I love this, and look at the art, certain art, especially if it's round or square, triangular. You can look at the art through it and see, oh, I see how it's structured. So that's my volume 6 of these. So if anybody wants those, they're for sale on my website, constructingtheuniverse.com. Thank you for having me mention that.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and for your time, Michael. I know you're very busy, but keep up the great work, and we'd love to obviously have you back and talk about maybe some of the numbers that we didn't have time for, if you're up for that.
I'd love that, Henrik. Thank you very much. It's been a very great pleasure speaking. And technology is not beyond anyone's vision if you understand how to read the simple shapes of things and the simple numbers. We talk about, we have the phrase, the book of nature. Well, it's quite true, actually. And if we realize that the language in which the book of nature is written is, as Galileo said, an alphabet of simple shapes like triangles, circles, squares, pentagons, and their combinations, you can actually read this book. And if you understand what the shape is about, because there are no accidents, in nature, in the sense that a five-petaled flower is not an accident. There's a reason for that fiveness, for its unfolding, for its harmony, its balance. And if we can read the simple shapes, understand what each shape is about. What is the circle about? What is the triangle about? And so forth. We can understand what nature is trying to do in any situation. And then we can work with it rather than against it.
That's right. And again, if we look at anything in nature, pretty much, we can slice an apple in half. We can look at how the branches grow on a tree and how the leaves are composite. These are things that at the initial stage might seem chaotic to us and random, but what you really detail in your book, obviously, is that all these things have a particular pattern to them, and there is a logic about how nature creates, partly because all these mathematical rules that were thrown out at me and never properly explained. It was simply so much that didn't make sense to me. And I guess that is the case with inquisitive minds that want to understand why something is in a certain way. Just taking the words of the teacher or an authority's words for it is not good enough. But if I, and I think most other students as well, would have been given just a fraction of some of the wondrous qualities of our 1 to 10 number system that you detail in your book, Michael, I think we would have had a completely different approach to numbers and math overall. So it's wonderful that you've written a book and that you're teaching classes, Michael. I think it's what all children should be given a chance to learn, at least.
Yes, thank you very much. I am teaching classes. I teach college classes at the California College of the Arts in San Francisco. And I have my own classroom where I teach whatever I'm interested in, and I seem to have found people who are also interested in it. Yes, it's a shame that children aren't shown the connection between simple numbers, simple shapes, nature, and even art. And it leads into philosophy. It's a very positive outlook. Instead of seeing the world as a crazy, fragmented, dangerous place, we can concentrate on the beautiful order and harmonies that actually underlie everything. And I think if children are shown
these things and put them together, right?
Those are beautiful and simple logic. It's nature's the best teacher. People have said that nature holds the patent, the original patent on every human invention. If we look to the way nature does things, we'll get the most efficient, energy-conserving, and also beautiful result, you see. It's all readable, and it's all down to simple shapes. It's not, we don't need complex equations and graphs and abstract, formulas and so forth. Just start to look at simple shapes. Nature's, circles, the squares, the triangles, pentagons, hexagons. I can name dozens of examples for every one of these. And when we start to see them, maybe even the cracks in the sidewalk.
Yes.
Walk around, we see cracks in the sidewalk. Do we notice that they're usually three-corner cracks, like the capital letter Y in English? The three meet at one point. Why does nature do three? Sometimes it's four. If it's a very slow crack, it'll crack in four. But three pulls together, very, very quickly. And just by noticing ordinary shapes all around us, it enriches our lives.
Absolutely. And there's so much to say, obviously, here in terms of art even. If we look at art specifically, I guess one question that's always... And today goes in that same tradition as we are going to look into numbers, structure, patterns, geometry, math, and how the universe is constructed using the most simple yet energy-efficient means. We'll be discovering the geometric code of nature with Michael S Schneider, who is the author of A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, the Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art and Science, a voyage from 1 to 10. Michael Tessarion first alerted me to this book, and we've had a wonderful time exploring the content. Michael S Schneider is an educator and writer who encourages a love of learning through an appreciation of mathematics, nature, art, and science. He holds workshops for teachers, artists, architects, and children on nature's numerical language. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in mathematics from the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn and a master's degree in math education from the University of Florida. He was a Fulbright Hays Scholar in India and taught in public schools for 11 years. Let me just say first that your book, A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, is a wonderful book filled with amazing discoveries and knowledge about nature's numerical language and how the universe is constructed. It's beautifully put together with diagrams, graphics, images, and explanations to how nature is constructed, and will give you the logic behind the numbers as well. I've always had somewhat difficult and most of the time excruciating experiences with math and math teachers and math classes.
Connection just simply of mathematics to nature. It would open everyone's eyes. It would change our outlook on not just mathematics, but the entire world, the cosmos,
yes,
and our place in it.
Did you come from an interest in math or geometry or art or maybe even architecture at the beginning before you wrote the book?
Well, as a teenager, as I was about 16, I got very interested in the mathematics of nature, and I decided to get degrees in mathematics so that I could understand this better. That was my real interest in that. Plus, mathematics seemed to me to be a kind of a language like poetry. There was something very beautiful in it. Now, I was not a very good mathematics student all through school. I didn't like it at all. It was seemed to me to be mostly memorization of rules, and it was just overwhelming. It didn't. It wasn't taught the way I would have liked it to have been taught.
Exactly. Same from my point of view, Michael. That's what I tried to mention.
Just about everybody's. Our teachers didn't know this, and their teachers didn't know this. Plus, the emphasis is on getting a job, getting into the high tech, getting all that information, rather than see the beauty, the absolute beauty behind it, and available to everyone. That's the wonderful thing about this. This is not the mathematics of nature and art.